The Pyrotechnic. Mountain Hill High School, Nevada, mid-afternoon. Stephen Cook, a naive man, about 25 years old, guards the school entrance. He had been a security officer at the school for about 3 years now. He actually enjoys his job and coworkers. A teenage boy walks through the front door with a large duffel bag. Stephen. Hey, you need a sign-in, kid. The boy pulls out a semi-automatic gun from the duffel bag and aims it at Stephen. Stephen. Whoa! Stephen puts his hands up into feet, and flames shoot from his hands and ignite the boy. Stephen stares in stunned silence as the boy rolls on the floor in a futile attempt to put out the flames. The school police officer runs up, yelling into his radio. Officer, I've got an active shooter at the high school. To Stephen, are you all right? Stephen can't say anything and just stares at his own hands in amazement. Stephen sits at his table in his apartment, reading the newspaper. The headlines read, Local security guard saves school, Powers, and fellow employee alleges seeing flames shoot from hands. Stephen attempts to release his powers again, staring at his hands until his finger ignites like a match. He attempts to control it, but the flame gets too large and the smoke alarm goes off. The flame then disappears. There's a knock at the door. Landlord, through the door. Steve, I heard the smoke alarm go off. Is everything okay? Stephen, yeah, sorry, my oatmeal was burning on the stove. Landlord, oh, all right. Begins to leave but turns around. Is it true? Stephen, what, the powers thing? Landlord, yeah, forget it. Turns and leaves. Stephen, to himself, what am I supposed to do with this? He holds his head in his hands when the phone rings. Stephen picks up the receiver. Hello? Tom Lynch. Stephen, what's going on? This is you in the paper, right? Stephen, oh, Tom, I'm glad it's you. Tom, I've known you for 9 years, and you don't tell me you have these, stalls, then whispers, powers. Stephen, that's because I didn't know until now either. Tom, yeah, well, a lot of people are talking about you being some kind of hero. Stephen, I'm not a hero. I don't want to be a hero. I can't be one. Tom, but you have a gift. You need to use it. Stephen, I can't even control this. How can I use it to be a hero? Tom, use it? He is cut off by a knock at the door. Stephen, look, I gotta go. He hangs up the phone and answers the door, where a distraught older woman is standing, his neighbor, Jill, breathing heavily. There's been a bank robbery down the street. 2 policemen have been shot. You have to hurry. Stephen, what do you think I can do about it? Jill, there's no one else. You have the powers. Hurry. Stephen, murmuring to himself thoughtfully. Use it. That's what Tom said. Use it. Stephen arrives at the bank where police are huddled behind the doors of their cars. One of the bank windows is shot out and the robbers continue shooting. Stephen holds up his hands. Come on, come on. Sheriff, oh no, get back, get back. The robbers look over at Stephen and soon he is looking down the barrels of their guns. When an officer fires his weapon, Stephen is startled, and to his surprise, fire comes out of his hands. In a brilliant flash of heat, the bank is lost behind a blanket of burning light. Stephen stumbles backwards, staring at his hands. He looks back at the bank and sees it is burning like a torch. The robbers are no longer in sight. 10 minutes later, firefighters are still struggling to put out the burning building, while Steve is inside a circle of reporters and police. Reporter 1. How did you do it? Sticking a microphone in his face. Stephen. Well, Reporter 2. So are you Nevada's new hero? Stephen. I don't. Reporter 3. Is this some new special effect? An urge for publicity? Stephen. No, Sheriff. Everyone back, let him through. Back! Sheriff pulls Stephen through the crowd of reporters until he is safely next to the sheriff's parked cruiser. Sheriff, that was quite some quick thinking, son. Hands Stephen a bottle of water, which he takes reluctantly. Stephen, thank you. Sheriff, some power you have there. Extraordinary for that matter. Stephen, I didn't mean for it to go that far. Sheriff, no, they would have turned you into Swiss cheese. You did the best you could. Say, we could use someone like you on the force. An hour and a half later, he stops at a gas station. He fills his tank and notices a woman and her son staring and pointing at him with fearful eyes. Without a word, Stephen gets into his car and continues down the desert road. He switches on the radio to calm his nerves and an announcer comes on. Announcer. Stop the robbery by setting the bank on fire. Can you believe this, Gale? If you ask me, this guy's a menace. Stephen shuts off the radio, sighing angrily and white-knuckling the steering wheel. He decides to turn off on a desolate dirt road that stretches the length of the Nevada desert. After another 2 hours of driving, his car coughs and jolts to a stop. He sees steam rising from the hood and he fumbles outside onto the dry, arid earth. Stephen screams, kicking his car. Not now. Not in the middle of the desert. He hears footsteps from behind him and then a voice. Ken Gardner. A little trouble with your car? Ken asks Stephen. He is wearing a tattered overcoat with high-top boots. Large bags hang under his eyes, and his large graying hair is messy and unkempt like his scraggly beard. Stephen. Yeah, it decided to give out on me, I guess. Ken. So follow me back to my trailer. I'll get you a phone to call someone. Ken smiles through his chapped lips. Somehow Ken looks familiar to Stephen, as if he knew him from somewhere, but he can't quite put his finger on it. Don't worry, it's not too far away. Stephen. Hesitating. Well, thank you. A short hike later at Ken's small trailer, Ken points Stephen towards his phone. Stephen thanks him and picks up the receiver to dial the tow company. Ken, staring at Stephen. Hey, now, wait a minute. You're that hero, aren't you? Ken grins, his eyes are full of excitement. Ken, I don't live in a cave, Mr. Cook. Stephen, have I met you before? Stephen says in an attempt to change the subject. Ken, he only smiles. Firepower, huh? That's really amazing, you know. Stephen, yeah, but I don't need it. I really don't even want it, actually. Ken, so give it to me. Stephen, scoffing. Yeah? How can I do that? Ken, don't you know, Mr. Cook, that every gift given to you is yours to use or give away? Stephen, stunned now. But how? Ken. Ken holds out his hand. Do you really want to be done with it? Stephen, yes. Ken, then take my hand. Stephen holds out his hand cautiously and then finally takes Ken's. Stephen watched, stunned, as sparks start to resonate from their clasped hands. He feels a suction sensation and they're both thrown backwards. Stephen stares at his own hands and knows that the powers are gone. Ken. Yes, yes. Ken storms outside into the desert, his smile even wider now. He lifts his hands and on command, in a brilliant flash, a shrub explodes into a flame. Yes. Stephen. I guess I should call the tow company, Stephen says with a hint of doubt. He watches the burning shrubs silently, and fear begins to creep up his spine. He goes in and calls the company and comes out to watch Ken again. Stephen. They can't come and tow me until tomorrow, Mr. Gardner. I'm sorry. Ken, still trembling with excitement. Then please take my couch for the night. Stephen, are you sure? Ken, of course, you've done so much for me, he says, marveling over his hands. Stephen heads off to the couch after a long day, but just before he falls asleep, he shoots straight up. Stephen, that's how I know him. He was a teacher at the school. I never got to meet him. Finally, Stephen dozes off. The next day, Stephen wakes up on the couch and calls Ken's name. It appears Ken is now gone, leaving no note or explanation. Stephen thinks nothing of it and gets ready to greet the tow truck driver. 10 minutes later, Ken is still gone, and the tow truck driver arrives. Driver. What's the problem, sir? He's oil-stained and looks like he hasn't showered in about 6 days. Stephen. I don't know. I guess you can take a look. Tow truck driver looks under the hood for a short period and approaches Stephen again. Driver. I think you can be on your way, Mr. Cook. All you need is a replacement spark plug. I may even have one in my truck. Stephen. Oh, well, thank you. How much do I owe you? Driver. Free of charge, Mr. Cook. You're a real hero. It's the least I can do. Stephen. Well, thanks again. The driver replaces the plug, gives Stephen one last wave, and heads off in a cloud of dust. Stephen gets into his car. Then Stephen drives off back onto the road, continuing away from his home. He switches on the radio out of habit and comes upon a news story already in effect. Announcer. We have helicopters live at the scene of the tragedy, giving us live updates every minute. We now go to our pilot, Gail Washington, live at Mountain Hill High School. Gail. Thanks, Bob. I'm right over at the high school now, which is only a fireball. It started a little after 11 this morning. This is the same school, I might remind you, that Mr. Cook had prevented the school shooting just 3 days ago. So far, police investigators are drawing the conclusion that Mr. Cook started the fire some 2 hours ago, but he is nowhere to be found. Hold on, Bob. I'm getting word now that a man has just walked out of the burning wreckage. As far as I know, everyone has already evacuated the building, so this is quite the mystery. I can't quite... Announcer. Is it Mr. Cook? Gale. I don't know. I see him. He appears to be on fire. He's approaching the fire trucks and oh, the fire engine has just gone up in flame. The police, I can't even see them anymore. Stephen. He switches off the radio and slams on the brakes. He sits there behind the wheel, mind racing. God, what have I done? He turns the car around, facing his home, facing his destiny. It was never mine to give. He hits the gas and races down the road toward the school.